April 28th will be election day. Between now and then, what do you think will define this campaign? Will it be as singular as Trump, or will there be more to it?
I think it's hard to imagine that it won't fundamentally be driven by Donald Trump, the hostility that's coming from the Oval Office, and all that that means for us historically in terms of our economy might possibly even mean in terms of our independence and our sovereignty. And so I think that will be the ballot question. And I think that helps to explain how we got here. Was suddenly Justin Trudeau found that this issue in many ways accelerated his departure. That in turn accelerated the arrival of Mark Carney. And it's led to the turnaround in the polls where suddenly people are saying, you know, Pierre Poilievre might have convinced us for the past 2 years that he's the best politician in the country, but I'm not sure we need a politician right now. Maybe we need somebody who knows how to lead their way through a crisis, an international crisis, an economic crisis, and that's been the strength of Mark Carney. Can he sustain it for 38 days? That's going to be the question. But I do think it's going to come down to Trump. Whoever is seen on Election Day, on April 28th, as best able to manage Trump is going to be Prime Minister, in my view.
Corey, let's talk about the polls for a second, because 6 months ago, if I had been interviewing Liberals and putting their numbers to them, they would have told me the only poll that matters is Election Day. Now, when I ask Conservatives, you know, at least on the record, they're saying, yeah, it only matters on Election Day. How close do you believe this race is at this moment?
Well, I think it's extremely close right now, and that's the big surprise. Like, as you correctly point out, we had like a year and a half of double-digit leads for the Conservatives, and often the first digit in that was a 2, which in and of itself is pretty unusual. The Conservatives were polling, you know, at times 7, 8, 9 points above, you know, what would be a winning, a winning number for them, or, you know, a high water number for them. So they were getting the votes of a lot of people who weren't traditionally voting Conservative. And I think that was largely being driven by just extreme dissatisfaction with Justin Trudeau. With him removed and then Trump coming in, the entire thing has changed in terms of what voters are looking for. I think Scott's right. It'll be largely centered around the Trump factor. And I think the Conservatives have been struggling to find a message track that works for them. They had obviously the perfect message track with Trudeau there. It was carbon tax, it was tax attacks, it's time for a change sort of message. And now I think we're gravitating more towards a sort of a safe hands narrative that seems to be driving voters, and a re-examination of Poilievre absent Trudeau, which is just a different set of issues. I think there's still a very clear way the Conservatives could pull off a victory here, but it's going to require change to get there.
You're looking live just now, just outside of Reid Hall, where in about 45 minutes' time we expect Prime Minister Mark Carney to meet with the Governor General to trigger essentially the snap election. Election Day will take place on April 29th. Kathleen, if next to the axiom, the only poll that matters on election is Election Day, for me is campaigns matter. Again, this time, this campaign feels like it will really matter when you take the backdrop that Corey just laid out about how close things are at the moment. What will you be watching for over the next 5 weeks as kind of the defining moments that you'll be looking ahead to?
Well, I think no one could have predicted 11 weeks ago, that was before Justin Trudeau stepped down or signaled his resignation, how much the political landscape would change. You know, my colleagues have spoken about that, the change in the polls, the change in the characters, the lead actors in this political drama that is playing out before us. And I just want to make the case that things will continue to change over the course of the next 5 weeks, as much as they've changed in the past 11. You know, I have been around long enough to know that New Democrats often are, you know, predicted to not survive an election campaign, low in the polls, going to be counted out of the narrative that it's only a choice between the blue team and the red team. And often New Democrats have been successful at flipping other times, but they do have a difficult fight ahead of them. You know, they've got to fight a two-front war, both against the Conservatives in Pierre Poilievre and fighting in some of those western seats in BC, obviously in Manitoba, on Vancouver Island, elsewhere, and even in Alberta. But they also have to take on the Liberals, and that's going to be in Ontario and in the Atlantic. I take note that Mark Carney is going to St. John's today, where New Democrats are fighting it out in St. John's John's East, trying to win back that seat from the Liberals with Mary Shortall. So it's going to be a tough race. I think Jagmeet Singh has to reframe the Trump threat in a way that brings it back to Canadians, their pocketbooks and who's going to defend them as individuals and their households. I think all the leaders agree on the threat of Trump and how we kind of build a resilient Canada. What they don't agree on is if they're going to be protecting, like millionaires and billionaires, or if they're going to be protecting regular people. And I think we've seen when New Democrats are in Parliament, they do things like pharmacare, dental care. They fight for things like our healthcare system to be public and universal. And that's what he has to do in terms of pushing the message forward to Canadians and saying why Canadians need to still elect New Democrats.
All right, our Sunday strategy session, we'll be checking in with them throughout the afternoon. Kathleen Montgomery tonight and Scott Reid.